presented at the Ms. and Mr. Charter Day program on St. Croix. And I want to applaud our SGA students for creating that program. This was the first year. I indicated that there were 3 values that Charter Day rests upon. Those 3 values are self-determination, reflection, and a pursuit of excellence. Dr. Krigger embodies all of that, because self-determination is not just the collective efforts of individuals in this community to create a university. It is the individual selections and decisions that people make to move their life forward. Dr. Krigger was educated at Charlotte Amalie High School, an excellent student. Her passion for self-determination encouraged her to go and become a graduate of Spelman College, one of the HBCUs mentioned in the poem. And from there, she received her master's in history from Columbia University, a very prestigious university. But she did not remain in the mainland. That spirit of self-determination made her want to come back home and to teach at the same school that she had attended, Charlotte Amalie. In 1967, we all were blessed that she decided to become a faculty member at the then College of the Virgin Islands. But that spirit of self-determination forced her to go away and get her PhD at Delaware, or the University of Delaware, so that she would have even more to offer to this community. She was a faculty member, a distinguished faculty member at this university for 33 years, retiring in the year 2000. That second principle of reflection is also embodied in Dr. Krigger, because reflection is a principle that asks us to look at how far we've come, to look at not only our successes, but to look at our challenges as well. Dr. Krigger's book, Race Relations in the U.S. Virgin Islands, is a reflection. She has, in essence, put a mirror in front of us to look at ourselves, to look at the sensitive issue called race that so many of us would often like to ignore. And she is creating that mirror through this book because of her deep love for wanting this territory, wanting the people of these islands to better understand our strengths, but to also understand that there are challenges that existed in the past and still exist today. And finally, this principle of excellence. That is her. She has always embodied this notion of doing her best and striving for excellence. If you remember the dates that I just gave you, she retired as a professor in the year 2000. This book is published in the year 2018. Most retirees 18 years past retirement are not writing scholarly books. They're sitting at home, as they should, relaxing. But her deep commitment to excellence, to sharing the best of what she has with the people she loved, is deep, abiding, and never-ending. And so when I reflect on the values of Charter Day and reflect on our keynote speaker, faculty member emerita, Dr. Marilyn Krigger, we are just very fortunate to have one of our own to come and share with us the results of her scholarly work and to share with us her presence that embody those values. I introduce to you our Charter Day speaker, Dr. Marilyn Krigger.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hall, and good morning and happy Charter Day to everyone. interesting, the mistresses of ceremony, Dr. McHale and Dr. Kahina, Dr. Hall and Dr. Mrs. Hall, and my pastor, the Reverend Dr. You still here, Dr. Pastor Winnell? Yes, the Reverend Dr. Winnell Curtin Roberts of the Memorial Moravian Church. The beautiful, let us say, entertainers that we had. I think I almost felt like I needed to just go home after that. and think about it for the rest of the day. So I'm very sorry that you weren't able to do that. You stayed here and you have to listen to me. But I think, people like Professor Parsons, Mr. Sproul, and Lorna, Miss Freeman, they really embody the best. And I think you move Virgin Islanders beyond words. Especially members of the board of trustees are past and present, and I've even had the opportunity of teaching a few of them on the board of trustees. Thank you. And let's see who else I'd like to, let's see. Okay, and all of the persons with whom I've had the privilege of teaching here, all of my former colleagues, present, professors at the university, and students. I'd also like to make some mention that I still in the program that one of my colleagues, Dr. Frank Mills, will be a respondent. And then the other one is a very special colleague, Dr. Kula Francis on St. Croix. And what is so special about Kula, in addition to having been a great student, it is a family affair. Because I had taught Kula's father also at UBI back in the 1960s before her. So she was sort of like a grand student that I was teaching. And I'm so very happy as to how she is done. To be very truthful, I do not like public speaking. And I usually, refuse all such offers. And I was about to do that. I had practically done it. But then, Dr. Hall, as you know, can be very persuasive. But then even more than that, I thought that sometimes as a professional, you have a duty to do things that you don't want to do. And so I ended up calling him back and said, okay, Dr. Hall, I've thought about it, and I will try to come and, make some remarks. And I thought that it was so very good of the committee to include, my book, the honoring of the book and the program, and that I certainly needed to be here to say something, realizing what a great honor you've bestowed on me. But even more than that, I'm happy to be here just because UBI's Charter Day. UBI's 56th anniversary. And not because it's a charter day, a birthday, because as we know, all of us, every institution, all of us have a birthday, once a year. But what really inspired me was what UBI has been able to achieve in these 56 years. It has really, I think, been very, very instrumental in our transforming and changing the Virgin Islands. As the young lady mentioned in her excerpts, there were a number of people, and you'd be surprised at some of them, who did not want the college here. One person ended up doing a sort of mathematical formula, and he tried to show that it would actually be less costly to send at the bigger scholarship to every single student who was willing to go on than to establish a college here. But then one of the things that was pointed out to him, and thank God it prevailed, that a college doesn't just serve its students, it serves the entire community. And UBI has really been very important in transforming the Virgin Islands and other places quite well. In fact, practically everyone, I think, in the Virgin Islands today has been touched in some way by the work of UBI. A sizable percentage of our educators, our healthcare professionals, other governmental employees and administrators, and even private business personnel are UBI products. The work of UBI personnel beginning with its president and professors and the institutions of our UBI, such as the Reichhold Center, the Tech Park and our Shinkroy, our athletic facilities and our teams, even when the teams don't do as well as we'd like them to do. All of these have been very great in adding to the quality of life in the Virgin Islands and making us see possibilities that we had not thought of before, and in really making the Virgin Islands what it is today. But if our effect had been only on the U.S. Virgin Islands, that would be great, but then we don't need to stop there at all. UBI has had a tremendous effect on the entire Eastern Caribbean, ranging, believe it or not, from the present chief executive of Anguilla and, let us say, many top performing persons in private industry and in government in many of the other islands of the Eastern Caribbean. In the British Virgin Islands, St. Martin, Nevis, St. Kitts, Antigua, Dominica, Barbados, those of us who've been here a long time can call the names of top persons in all of those islands that we've had the privilege of our teaching. And then, of course, not only in the Caribbean, but on the U.S. mainland and any place where you would find a UBI alumni. Okay? However, if I had, even if I had had no special connection with UVA, if I had never, become a part of the institution, never taught here, I would still know of the way in which UVA has transformed this community because of my knowledge as a local person. As Dr. Hall said, I was a member of the class of 1955 of Charlotte Amalia High School. Needless to say, as every class does, we thought it was a very great class. And, one of the, not that we had much to do with it, but that one of the aspects of greatness that we always pointed to is that we were the first class in the Virgin Islands to have attained 100 graduates. We had specifically 104. And I mean, this was a big thing. I remember many people saying, you hear about high school? There's 100 students that graduated in 1 year. Imagine 100 students in 1 year. Now, when I read now of 200 and 300 students in my school, I'm sort of amazed. And I said, wow, the Virgin Islands have really grown a lot. But what impresses me about the effect of UBI is that of those 104 students that we had, because of the economy at the time, because of the expense of going away to the States, only about 10 to 12 of us were able to go away. I looked in my yearbook and I counted for sure 10 of us who I knew were sent away to school, and there may be possibly two others. So only about roughly 10% of the class was able to go on. The others, what many of the boys used to do, whether they wanted to go do it or not, they went and they enlisted in military service, so that afterward, of course, they could use the GI Bill, to get part of their education paid for. And many of the girls simply ended up working, and after, maybe their children had gotten to a certain stage, then they would end up coming to UVA and taking courses. So then, I had the privilege of teaching several of my classmates. In fact, teaching them here at UVI. In fact, there were 3 members of my class, the class of 55, who would end up becoming faculty members here at UVI. Dr. Orville Ken, Dr. Gilbert Sproul, and myself. So all of us had this privilege of teaching persons who had been our classmates in high school. I might mention, which I think everybody, most of you probably know, that Gilbert and I we were happy to just remain teaching faculty. But then our classmate Orville, who had also been the valedictorian of our class, he would go on to become the 3rd president of UVA. Let's see, I'm trying to shorten a little some of the things that I had read. Okay, I imagine that one of the things I might say, I hope you won't be disappointed, but I don't know if I was expected to discuss the book, but after thinking about it, I decided not to. Because I know that some of you may have already read it, thank you, and thanks to all who have bought it or plan to. And so I figured no sense in telling you what you already know. And then I've been signing books today, so I know that some of you are now buying the book, and I hope you will read it, so I don't need to tell you what you will be reading. But even though I thought the excerpts were excellent, let me mention something about the excerpts. I'm especially happy that you read the excerpts having to do with Addie Artley, a radio personality, being in the library that night. Because I think everyone knows Dr. Hall has announced that the Board of Trustees plans to honor Addie Artley with an honorary doctorate degree. Thank you. I agree with those of you who've clapped. I think Addie more than deserves it. In those weeks after the hurricane, I think he was a psychiatrist under everything who kept, most of us in these islands together. But I have heard one or two people saying, what the need to give the Addie a degree for? He doesn't deserve it. But I think he deserves it for many reasons. And that incident in the college library that night, when the students had taken the library over, and they were there, they'd been there all day, and the afternoon he decided to go. And as chairman of the education committee of the legislature, and simply as a concerned person, to go and try to, talk them into coming out peacefully. And one of our colleagues, Dr. Hoover, he's now passed, he did also. So they did not succeed. I think the occupation ended when the Department of Public Safety, which is what we used to call the police department then, when they include the amount of tear gas that they were pumping into the library to the degree that the students could practically no longer breathe, and they were like forced to come out. But that the fact that Addie had gone, Addie and Dr. Hoover had gone to be with the students, or Dr. Hoover mentioned that he had gone to be with the students specifically because he thought it might prevent a Kent State situation. Those of you who don't know about that know that at one point, I think it was back in the 60s too, when the Kent State students were protesting something, policemen ended up shooting 4 of them, I believe. And Dr. Hoover thought that if police or other authorities knew that there were adults in there with them, they would be less reluctant to shoot or do something like that than if it was students only. So again, I'm very happy. I think all of us maybe can support the action of the college and the board of our trustees in giving to Mr. Artley an honorary degree. Since I will not be discussing the book itself, I thought I would more discuss a couple of the questions I have been asked by people who have already, bought the book. And one of the questions I've been asked, sort of to my surprise, is how come you're writing about race relations? People of your age, of your generation, aren't generally interested in our race relations. And also people of your sex. Usually women aren't too interested in race relations. So this ended up forcing me to sit down and think, go things back in my life as to why I would, what made me so interested in this topic. And the very first thing I thought of was when we went to 7th grade at Charlotte Amalia High School. At that time it was held where the legislature is today. And we had a white American teacher named Miss Thurman. She taught us United States history. And one day she ended up asking us, now I can't remember whether this was at the beginning of the class, whether she asked to determine how much we already knew so she would know what she needed to do or not, or whether we were far advanced in the class and she was trying to test how effective she had been in teaching us. But she asked who was our favorite U.S. president and why. And when it became my turn, I remember stating quite clearly that my favorite president is Abraham Lincoln, because if it were not for him, people like me would still be being beaten by white masters. And I remember Miss Thurman looked at me with surprise. I can't remember whether she answered or not, whether there was a verbal response, but her eyes opened very widely and her brows went up. I could see that she was, quite surprised that I said that. And to tell the truth, I went home and I thought about it the night, and I myself was sort of surprised. That I had the nerve to say that. And I ended up saying to myself, well, I hope Miss Thurman is not mad with me, but that is really the way I feel. And I think it's from then on, I realized that I was a person who was very concerned with injustice, with what racism had done to the relationships between blacks and white, and how blacks were usually treated. And then, I guess what cemented it even more is that after I graduated from college, from high school, I went to college in Dr. Hall's state, Georgia. I attended Spelman College in Georgia, which he mentioned. Very of the HBCUs, it's usually been ranked for a long time as one of the very top, HBCUs. And this is why they were wise enough to send their daughter there a few years ago. So Spelman is a very great institution, and you won't believe, we were so uneducated in some ways that I remember when we were taking a test in high school that would determine whether or not we might get a scholarship to go to college. We were given a list of 10, I guess it would be something like the SAT today. We were given a list of about 10 colleges, and we were told to check 3 of them. So if those of us who did well, we might get a scholarship to some one of the colleges that we had checked. And of the 10, and even though my mother was the teacher herself, of the 10 colleges listed, I think, knew anything about 2 of them. I had not heard about most of them. So I had heard about Hampton, that is where a lot of Virgin Islands had gone. And I had heard, I think the other one I checked was Tuskegee. But I didn't know any after that. And so I had the other 8 colleges, I didn't know enough to check them, but I had to check one more. And I remember doing, what you often do when you were a child. I suddenly closed my eyes and said, I'm going to say I must choose this one. And my finger ended up on Spelman. And believe it or not, that is how I chose the college that I did. Spelman ended up communicating with me and offering me a scholarship before any of the others. And I went to Spelman. And it was such a great experience that if I had to live 100 other lives, I would want to go to a Spelman each time. Okay? But Georgia, as you know, as most of the South, was a very segregated state at that time. And during the first, couple of months I had been there, I always went with other students at the school who knew Atlanta better than I did. So we'd take the bus and go to town and all of that. But a day came after I'd been there for a few months when I wanted to go to town to shop, and nobody else wanted to go. So I said, oh well, you've been here long enough. You know how to take the bus and get to town by yourself. So I went to a bus stop, and when the bus stop got on it, and did, what I had done in St. Thomas, I looked for, what seats were available. And about 3 or 4 rows back of the driver, there was a seat available. I would, 2 seats. One, a white gentleman was at the window seat, and the aisle seat was available. So I went and sat in the aisle seat, as I would have done if I was still at home. When I sat down, the gentleman acted as if an atomic bomb had been dropped beside him. He jumped up right away, and he said, nigger, you know you're not supposed to be sitting there. And then he called the driver. He said, driver, this nigger is here sitting next to me. And the driver looked at me, and he said, you know you're not supposed to be there. I am not moving this bus until you move. Well, even though I had known that it was a segregated place and everything, when that kind of thing happens to you, sometimes you're just so scared you don't know what to do. I was so afraid, I sat in the seat petrified. And naturally at this time, everybody in the bus is looking at me. Well, thank God there were some black people in the back of the bus. So one lady came and got me, held my arm gently, and said, come with me, honey. Took me to the back of the bus. Well, the first thing they asked me when I got there was, in the back with them, where are you from? And I I said St. Thomas, Virgin Islands, and they looked at each other and shook their heads. They said, yeah, we figured you were from the islands or Africa. But you know, that, and you know, a number of similar experiences that I had in Georgia, you know, imprinted on me how terrible racism was, how terribly it had affected our world, more so, I think, my race than any other race. And I think that gave me a commitment to doing, you know, whatever I could, you know, in regard to race relations. I'm trying to skip as much as I can. Well, another thing that I've been asked about regarding the book is many people ask about the cover of the book. For those of you who don't know, I wanted to do two things, thank you, on the cover of the book. I wanted to show, of course, the beauty of our island, which I think that incidentally, I did not furnish the cover picture. It came the company, the Carolina Academic Press. Apparently all publishing companies keep quite a store of pictures that they can use for illustrations that they need. So one day they saying, do you have a picture to put on the front of the book? So I said, well, I'll try and get one. And they ended up sending me a couple of pictures, and this was one. They said, if you want to, you can simply choose one of them. And this was the one that I chose. Incidentally, one of the other pictures that they had sent was that well-known picture of in St. John of Trunk Bay. You know the picture with the little island in the bay? And so I said, well, this is pretty. It is one of the best-known, you know, Virgin Islands pictures, but I'm writing mainly about St. Thomas, and that's from the island of St. John, which, of course, they hadn't known the difference. But I chose which, as you can tell, is a view of you know, the harbor and Charlotte Amalia from the Havenside area. But then the other big factor was that I wanted to put something on the cover that was representative of, you know, race relations. So I wanted a picture with people of, you know, at least two races in it. And I was working on that. In fact, one of the persons that I should say two of the persons that I had asked were a former colleague here at UVI, Dr. Enrique Carone and his wife. You know, so many of you know them, they're an interracial couple. So I had gotten them and another interracial family, and we were supposed to have a photograph taken, and that would be superimposed on the picture of our Charlotte Amalia as we have on the cover. But I don't know if you remember, it rained a lot. Last year was a funny year. It was not only the hurricanes, but it rained a lot in the months before the hurricanes. And we were trying to do this in July. Every time we would set a time for a picture, for some reason a bigger shower would come down. And so then finally we checked the weather long way in advance, and we set an afternoon to take a picture. And the person who was my photographer, just the day before, he got word that his father had died. And so he wasn't able to function anymore. And we tried. I know my son is a classmate of Louis Idol is his name, who's a graphic artist. So then when the picture part fell through, he said, well, why don't you try Louis Idol? So he called Mr. Idol, and Idol said, oh, I would be so willing, but I have enough work that I'm occupied for the next 4 weeks. Please come back in 4 weeks. But at this time, the publishing company was telling me that everything was ready to go to the press. They simply needed that picture. And so, they looked through the pictures that I had sent. By the way, if you're ever writing a book and you need Virgin Islands pictures, just go out to the Charles Turnbull Library, and I imagine the same applies to the library in St. Croix. They have thousands and thousands of pictures out there. And so, I ended up deciding. I didn't find any picture out there that I sort of liked for the cover. But the company would tell me that of the pictures that I had sent them, most of the pictures in the book I got at the Turnbull Library and I sent to them. They said there is one of the pictures that you can use, which we think would be good. And the one that they recommended was the picture that is now there. Well, do you know how there's a rivalry now, quite a rivalry between let's say Charlotte Amalia High School and Ken High School? Well, when I was growing up, the two high schools were Charlotte Amalia High School and St. Peter and Paul. This is a picture of the 1958 graduating class of St. Peter and Paul. And when I saw the physics picture, being a Charlotte Amalia High School person, I said,